We're going to spend the first about an hour talking on the topic of pikuach nefesh, saving lives, but not when there's a danger to somebody's physical body, but when there's a danger to their spiritual life. When I'm worried that they may assimilate or I might lose them to their Judaism, their body is safe, but their neshama is in danger. Can I break Shabbat for them? That's what we'll do for an hour. Then we'll pause for a minute, and then after that we'll spend a few minutes at the end discussing our Musar. We're going to start a new topic in Musar today. That'll be at the end. Okay. Yes.
Translate everything?
Yes, it does, absolutely. So our class today is going to be divided into two parts. Yeah.
Oh, we have to do the niggun again.
Oh, Yisrael, Shalom Aleichem. What a pleasure to see you. Shalom, shalom. The first part, we're going to be, as Ovadia mentioned, we're going to spend the first part talking about Pikuach Nefesh in general. You know what? Why is it that we push aside the whole Torah in order to save somebody's life? And then we're going to look at a crazy, crazy story that the Rashba talks about, where the person's life was not in danger, but their neshama, they were worried that the person had been taken away on Shabbat in order to have them convert to Christianity. And if we don't get them back quick enough, we might lose them. So that's the second, it's a story. And then we're going to look at how various halachic authorities dealt with that question. But I hope that in our discussion, we will have an idea of like priorities. But Ezrat Hashem, none of us will be in these situations, not pikuach nefesh physically, not pikuach nefesh spiritually, but we certainly get an idea of priorities. You know, what are the most important things in leading a Jewish life. Okay, so we're going to start our discussion by talking about pikuach nefesh in general. That's the first topic. You see, at the top of the sheet, it says, defining pikuach nefesh. And the Gemara tells a story. I mean, there's Pikuach Nefesh is a shiur in itself. And maybe we'll dedicate another shiur on another day about the laws of Pikuach Nefesh in general. You know, when you're allowed to break Shabbat, how do you break Shabbat? When is it Pikuach Nefesh, when is it not? But that's not our topic for today, the traditional Pikuach Nefesh, but when a soul is in danger. So the Gemara tells us like this. It's a lovely story about various rabbis who were on a journey. Rabbi Ishmael, Rabbi Akiva, Rav Elazar ben Azariah were on a journey. For Levi Hasadav Rabbi Ishmael, Benoshe Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Malchin Achareihem. And they had students that were walking with them. Levi Hasadar and Rabbi Ishmael, who was the son of Rav Elazar ben Azariah. And these two young men, Levi Hasadar and Rabbi Shmuel, the son of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, asked the elders a question. Minay lefikuach nefesh shedochet haShabbat. How do we know that pikuach nefesh pushes aside Shabbat? We all know, it should not be a chidush to any of you here, that if life is in danger, we always put life ahead of breaking Shabbat. So if someone is feeling ill, if, their life is in danger on Shabbat, you're not allowed to call the police or call an ambulance. It's a mitzvah to call an ambulance in order to save their lives. If there's a life in danger, so it is a mitzvah to transgress Shabbat in order to save a life. Okay, so these young men, Levi Asadar and Rabbi Shmuel, asked their elders, that is Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Akiva, and Rav Elazar ben Azariah, how do you know? And each of them gave different reasons, but I'm only going to mention two of them here. One of them, Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Shimon ben Minasia says, based on a pasuk, because it can't be a feeling. You have to provide a source. It feels right, that's not good. You have to prove that it makes sense. You follow? So he says, we learn from the pasuk, V'shamru v'nei Yisrael et Shabbat. The Jewish people kept Shabbat. So from that one could perhaps extrapolate, says Rabbi Yishmael ben Benasya, Chalel alav Shabbat haba Achat kadei shishmor Shabbatot harbei. If the goal is to keep Shabbat, v'shamru v'nei Yisrael et Shabbat, so then I want to do everything to allow maximum shmirat Shabbat. So here's a chap over here, and if this chap's life is in danger and we're able to save his life, then we would ensure much more shmirat Shabbat. And therefore, chalel alav Shabbat achat kadei shishmor Shabbatot harbei. That is one argument. Okay, and then Rabbi Yehuda ben Shmuel gives a different answer. He says, I have hatam hava amina didi adif mititu. I would have presented a position, and in my opinion, my argument is stronger than any of the rabbis' arguments. I could have refuted all of their... Didi means mine. Didi, my argument. Adifa is from the word adif, is better. My argument, Hebrew... Me too, yeah. Didi...
My argument's better than theirs.
Exactly. Didi, adifa, me too, exactly. What is my argument? The Torah says, "V'chai bahem." You shall live by the Torah, v'lo she'amut bahem. In other words, Torah it brings us to life. If you want to see an example, an experience of Torah bringing people to life, you need look no further than the very institution in which we are right now. It's a living. I mean, you see people coming to life. V'chai bahem. Torah brings you life. You follow? And therefore, if my Shmirat Shabbat would cause a death, that can't be Ratzon Hashem. Because God's will is that we should live. And therefore, if my performance of the mitzvah would cause something else, then that can't be Ratzon Hashem. You follow? V'chai bahem v'lo she'amut bahem. The mitzvah can't be the cause of someone's death. So it can't be that I can't save a life on Shabbat. You hear that argument? Now that argument is very different to the first argument. The one about keep one Shabbat, if you save his life for one Shabbat, then he'll keep many Shabbatot. Do you see the difference between the nafkamina between them? The Meiri in the next source points out the nafkamina between them. Let's read the Meiri. It's really a very, very powerful idea. The Gemara tells us, I think it's in Masechet Ohalot, talks about a guy. Who was I learning Muksa? Oh no, it was not somebody in here now. If somebody, there's an avalanche, and an avalanche of rocks lands on a person on Shabbat, right? Which is really an unfortunate. Yeah, I mean, it's not the best. You know what I mean? You'd want to avoid that. And this rocks are muksa, because they're muksa machmat kufa. I don't have any use for these rocks. So am I allowed to move the rocks away in order to save the guy underneath?
Yes.
Excellent, good. So the Mishnah says you're allowed to remove the rocks. However, if it becomes clear that unfortunately the person has left this world and moved into the world to come, then there's no value in removing the rocks because you can't save his life.
Wait to recover the body until Shabbat.
Exactly, correct. Exactly. That's what the Gemara talks about. Now, just for you to understand, it should be clear, the Gemara is not describing a situation that happens every week. The Gemara is teaching a principle. You follow? It's helping us define life, helping us understand the laws of muktzah, but it's not describing a scenario that occurred. It's using this case for us to understand ideas. Is that clear to you? Okay.
One question on this case. Can they move the body if there would be danger the dogs would eat it or something like that?
Oh, so that's something else. Then that would be a different situation.
If you have the mitzvah of kavod meat.
Yeah. So there
does Shabbat trump over that or
no, you probably need to stay there.
Okay.
In order to, obviously, to protect her. I imagine that the procedure would not be that you remove the rocks, realize they've moved into the next world, and say, oh, well, that's a shame, and then we'll come back tonight. I imagine that people would stay there until. Shalom Aleichem. How are you doing? What a pleasure to meet you. Shalom uvracha. Oh wow, you're such a sweet person. Well, Chaim, pleasure to meet you. Where are you from in the world? Oh, excellent. You can talk to Bain. That's it. Excellent. Welcome.
Have a good day.
Okay, so the Meiri says, now look at this, is really, really interesting. And here we'll see a difference between the positions in the Gemara. They start removing these rocks and they check his breathing and they find that he's alive. Nimtzeu chai. Mashlimim lefokocho af al pi shenitbareh sheyesher lo lichyot afilu sha'a achat. Now this is amazing. What happens if they remove the rocks and then they discover this person in the rocks and they discover that he only has a couple more minutes. He's alive, but he's only got a couple more minutes to live. So if you say, I'm going to save him this Shabbat in order that you have many more Shabbatot, if, I don't want to say terrible things, but if statistically at least, there's a chance that this is his last Shabbat, so then one would, if we say that it's all about, break one Shabbat in order to save many Shabbatot, one would stop.
Well,
but we don't.
Arguments. One, if someone is on life support,
Yeah.
we say even if they're in a coma, Jews don't believe in pulling the plug because as long as there's life, there's a chance.
Oh, yes.
So you
About the
can't
candle.
say, you can't say he has 2 minutes, he's going to die, let's leave him, because you never know, and you don't have permission to let someone die.
Correct.
Okay, and B, if someone is dying and they're in tremendous pain, isn't it a mitzvah of chesed to alleviate as much pain as possible so that they can go peacefully?
Oh, so listen, excellent. The Meiri says, why is it? It's such a musa, and it's such a musa and a very scary idea here. Why is it that we're allowed to break Shabbat for this person? Not that he's going to have 100 more Shabbatot, but every second of life is infinitely valuable. Who knows what thought he might have in that last second of his life that could change everything. Exactly. Shebe'oto sha'a yashuv b'libo v'yitzvadeh. That you'd allow this person to leave this world in a good spot. You follow? Do you remember we spoke about the flickering flame, about not extinguishing a flame? So the analogy of the flame is an excellent analogy, because if I've got a flickering flame and I take a light to that flickering flame, my flight, meaning the secondary light, it doesn't matter whether I'm getting that secondary light from a flickering flame or if I'm getting it from a huge bonfire. That light will be the same light. So my potential, as long as the light is still lit, is infinite. My potential as a human being. I tell you what's so powerful about this Meiri is that every second of life is so incredibly valuable. It makes the way we choose to use our time such an important thing for us to consider. So we save this guy's life. Why? V'chai bahem v'lo sheyamut bahem. That we make every effort to allow people to live. Why? Because every moment that I'm alive, I can fix something. I can make the world better, make myself better. I can do something good in every second that I'm alive. So if I'm not going to take that opportunity away from him, you follow? Isn't that brilliant? But you see that follows very nicely with the last argument that we saw. V'chai bahem, every minute of life is valuable. That's a Meiri. The Rambam says the same thing. The Rambam also says, the Rambam, really based on the Gemara, says, if you find him alive, I'm in the second part of the Rambam, Afal pi shenitrot sets v'yeshar shiavri, I'm still, we know that he's not gonna improve, he's not gonna recover. These are the last few minutes. Nevertheless, why? Because there's a value for that moment of life. Every moment of life. Tem Shomim? Okay. That's a Rambam. We see it, you're not quite carried away with this because they all say the same thing, but I think it's a very powerful idea. The Biur Halacha is about Chafetz Chaim, Lifnei, just over 100 years. just under about 100 years ago. That's the safest way to say it. He wrote the Mishnah Berurah, the Biur Halacha. He writes over here. He's commenting on the Shulchan Aruch. V'tam detachina mitzvah achat, ela tachina kol mitzvah b'shvil chayim shel Yisrael. We push aside every mitzvah because of chayim shel Yisrael. This minute of life, you have this holy soul, and that holy soul could do infinite amount of goodness in a split second. I mean, every split second, and therefore all effort is made at all time in order to make sure that lasts for as long as possible. Joy, questions, clear?
Yeah.
Michael.
I'm wondering to what extent can you stretch this breaking Shabbat so that you can keep many Shabbatot? Obviously, okay, Pikuach Nefesh is an obvious example. You know, okay, we understand that you can save a life and break Shabbat to save someone's life, but like, I feel like it's a statement that can be misinterpreted. You know.
Can you give an example?
I don't know, and somebody using this statement to make an excuse for why they can break Shabbat. I don't know. Let's say I'm trying to quit smoking, right? And I'm gonna be like, this is my last cigarette, and I'm just Friday night I'm gonna smoke this one, and then next week I'm done. You know, and that's.
And they've been doing that every week for the last.
Exactly right.
You can't call it a cigarette Pikuach Nefesh.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm asking. Is to what extent is this statement?
Yeah.
Pikuach Nefesh is.
Depending upon how far he's in it, I guess you could try to stop him.
We're gonna call. The truth is.
Just starting.
You should try to stop him. He shouldn't be lighting a cigarette on Shabbat, regardless.
But I'm saying it's a slow poison.
Yeah.
You start once and you're in control. By the next week, you're already addicted.
Right.
So
That's true.
At what point do you say cigarette is now kind of official?
So with but the truth that Pikuach Nefesh, as we are discovering as we enter this topic, is a very, very wide topic. I would like to narrow our discussion for today on the question that we're building up towards a question that we're going to read in a minute in the Bet Yosef. Next week, Be'ezrat Hashem, I think we'll dedicate a lesson to the wider discussion of Pikuach Nefesh. There was also private Pikuach Nefesh and the truth is we could spend 3 weeks on Pikuach Nefesh. But your question is a good one about.
But I'm just asking if this statement, that breaking Shabbat, one Shabbat so they can keep many Shabbatot, is referring to Pikuach Nefesh specifically?
Yes. Pikuach Nefesh.
Read the last sentence, right? We say, in English, we say, Rabbi says, the exposition of all of them could be refuted, except for that of Shmuel, which cannot be refuted, and Shmuel is the one who said Chai Bahem. So according to that last statement, the argument of you can break one to keep many isn't necessarily a halachic fact.
Yeah, the Vachai Bahem, the meaning the argument that sort of pushed aside, that became the basis of these halachot is Vachai Bahem. That was the argument that trumped. Okay.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to summarize the next piece over. I'll read it very quickly. This is talking about a risk, saving a life, which is really what we've been discussing until now. And how does that parallel with the possibility of saving a soul? So the Midrash tells us that, there were different types of people that attacked the Jewish people, different nations. The Egyptians tried to attack us. The Moabites, the Edomites tried to attack us. But Amalek, absolutely.
Name a country, any country.
No, but the Midrash talks about, based on the psukim in the book of Devarim, that talk about different nations that we can marry into those nations through the generations. To marry an Egyptian, the Egyptians who, we were slaves there. Yeah, exactly. We were slaves in Egypt for 210 very unpleasant years. And these nasty people, after 3 generations, after 3 generations of converting, can enter the Jewish people. That is Mitzrayim. However, Moab, Moab, the Moabites that enticed they were the women that enticed the Jewish men. So the Moabites could never enter Kahal Hashem. Nachon Moavi, that's how Ruth was a Moaviyah, but she wasn't a Moabite. So the Midrash,
This is
yeah.
slightly off topic, but in today's world where we're not sure who's an Amalek.
Oh, nowadays, yeah.
How do we allow converts bichlal? Because for all we know, we're allowing someone who.
So nowadays, none of this is relevant. At the time, during the first temple period, there was a chap called Sancheriv. Have you heard of Sancheriv?
Heard the name.
He was a very terrible person. And Sancheriv, when he captured, he captured the northern kingdom. He scattered the northern kingdom. The Judah survived, but Israel was lost. He scattered that nation. He scattered all the nations around the world. And, sort of move nation to nation. This idea of this is, that guy, he's a Moabite. That he's from Amalek. That guy, after the time of Sancheriv, that sort of division didn't exist. It does not exist. But the Midrash points out something interesting, and that is the Moabites killed far less Jews than the Egyptians. The Moabites enticed Jewish women, and there was a plague, and many people, that Moshe Rabbeinu punished us, but in terms of an enemy, I don't know if that's the right word, an enemy of the Jewish people, I would have thought that Egypt, where we were slaves for many more years.
Between Sar and Oyev.
Huh?
Sar and Oyev.
Oh, you're good. Excellent. Well, there are lots of there's a lot to talk about there. The Midrash says, and this is very, very important, the Egyptians were dangerous because they tried to destroy our bodies. They wanted to kill us. But the Moabites were even more dangerous because they tried to destroy our souls. Because they tried to entice, they tried to, they weren't attacking us, they were enticing the Jewish men. You follow?
Like the Western Jews, for example.
Huh?
The Western secular Jews, so people who are very much into Western culture, and they are Jews, but they want to destroy the religion from inside, let's say. Am I
like Marx?
Yeah, well,
Marx is too far, but it's one good example.
No, but people that aren't, well, let's say like missionaries. They're not here to attack us. They're not going to try to kill, but they're trying to corrupt. They're trying to entice. That's a greater threat. They're not going to try to kill people. They're not destroying the body. They're destroying the soul.
Like, halacha l'maisa, because we don't.
They're not destroying any souls.
Because we
corrupting
don't know who's who anymore. We just allow anyone to convert.
Correct.
Why did we go that way and not the other way? Because Judaism is not a religion that encourages conversion.
Oh, that's a discussion for another day. That's a good question, but it's not on our topic. But it's good, and we'll discuss it in the Beit Midrash.
Sounds good.
Okay. Based on this Midrash, I would say, in fact, we will say that if we're so worried about destroying a body, if we treat Moab more seriously than we treat Mitzrayim, it seems that a danger to the soul is greater than the danger to a body. You follow? And therefore, I would think that if we're going to go to all these efforts for pikuach nefesh, someone faints in shul, then of course you would call an ambulance. So someone's neshama is in danger. Alachat kama v'kama. You hear that? Okay. That is all an introduction. I'm going to go straight to the Bet Yosef, which is it says practical example.
Is this in the Shulchan Aruch?
This is on the tour. The Bet Yosef is on the tour.
So
Yeah.
outside Shulchan Aruch.
Pre-Shulchan Aruch. Yeah, the Baal, the Bet Yosef, the Mechaber. Okay. Now here, the Bet Yosef quotes the Rashba. A crazy story. I want to read the question with you, then we'll discuss based on the information that we now have about Pikuach Nefesh. V'chai bahem v'lo she'amut bahem, a minute, not more than a minute, and then our little midrash. I sort of planted interesting sources for you to consider based on what we've read so far. What would you do in the following situation? Do you see this? A Jewish girl is abducted on Shabbat. I'm going to read it. Nishal HaRashba. The Rashba was asked, Al Ach Echad Sheshalcho La b'Shabbat. Somebody was sent on Shabbat. Shehotziu Bito. So somebody came to the Rashba on Shabbat with a question. Somebody whose daughter was kidnapped or abducted from her home. Al Yidei Yisrael Meshumat. Do you know what that means? A Jew who has left religion. But in the time of the Rashba, there weren't atheists. So if I'm not Jewish, I guess it was Europe. So I'm guessing they were Christians, right? So they've taken this Jewish girl from her home. Maybe it was a Jewish boy around her age who knew her, who wants to seduce her into his non-Jewish life. You follow? And he does it on Shabbat. Lotzia Michlal Yisrael, in order to move her away from the Jewish people. Im Yasim Laderech Palmov b'Shabbat Pen Yifchiduha or Mishtamed. So the question is, can he on Shabbat jump into his wagon and follow them? You're not allowed to travel outside the Tchum. You're not allowed to get into a wagon. Can he follow his daughter on Shabbat? Because he's worried that if he waits till Sunday, it could be I might have lost her by Sunday. I can speak to her on Sunday, but the damage may already have been done by Sunday. You follow?
Mm.
Isn't this a crazy question? Immutar. Huh?
I think we discussed this before.
Oh, really?
This particular case. I don't remember what the context was, but we did. And I think I asked a question on this last time. How relevant or is the fear, that what's going to happen? I mean, is she gone forever, or like, maybe she's going to come back and be like, yeah, this guy tried to kidnap me and convert me to Christianity. I don't know what he was thinking. Like how real is the fear of that she might not?
Yeah, you're right. You're right. It's hard for us to know.
Realistically speaking, though, in order for this case that it happened Dafka on Shabbat, you should have had to have known the guy beforehand.
No.
For at least some time.
Not necessarily, but I'm just
Come
saying,
to the
like,
house, take her and win.
I mean, yeah, you can kidnap her and knock her out, but I'm saying, like...
Or just pull her.
Huh?
well, this is based on a real case. Someone.
Yes, yeah. I think they are absolutely concerned, without a doubt. They are mamish concerned that, and I suppose that has to be the premise of the question.
Yeah.
They are concerned that if we wait till Sunday, she won't come back. But there's no danger to her life. She's going to be fine. She'll live a very comfortable life as a non-Jewish woman. Well, let's say that's what could happen.
So if they know for certain that, so in this case, we're assuming they know for certain that she'll be alive and fine, but she'll be Christian.
Correct.
Sunday. So I think I would say in that case, maybe you can follow them. And
I agree. I would jump as well. Then.
Yeah.
You'd get into a wagon.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Anyone? Any other thoughts? Yes. How are you doing?
She would marry or not?
This guy? I think so. I'm guessing yes.
Okay.
Would you get in the wagon?
About the conversion can be annullated and just consider the conversion. But about the marriage is quite different because could consume the marriage. So it's a point.
Oh, you mean they may consummate their marriage, her and this guy? Let's assume they would.
Of course they'll
About
get
the Neshama, before I think we can, the Jewish people could okay.
my daughter.
You're gonna get in. You'd get on the way. He's halfway there already.
Bro, I would get in the wagon so quick, I don't even know.
And he's looking for his gun permit, so he'll be
The shotgun, I have a shotgun, some bullets in my pocket, I'm right in the wagon.
Right.
I'm right in that wagon.
Anyone? Any other position? Anyone question whether you would be allowed to? Or it's quite clear to everyone. Clear.
I think it's pretty obvious that you would.
Okay, so we're going to discuss. There are really two positions here: the Rashba, his answer, the Balei Tosafot and their answer, which we're going to look at. Those two answers: the Rashba's answer. There's all in the Beit Yosef. The Beit Yosef quotes the Rashba, who asks the question, because the Beit Yosef gives the Rashba's answer, and then he gives Tosafot's answer, and then he, in his Shulchan Aruch, writes a ruling based on the story. So we're gonna before we look at the Rashba or the Tosfot, the Rashba quotes a Gemara. So I'm going to summarize this Gemara to you quickly, partly to save time. The Gemara is on the sheet. It's a Gemara in Shabbat, the beginning of Masechet Shabbat. It's a very, very interesting dilemma. Tell me what you would do in this dilemma. If you are a religious Jew, right? I don't know if you've ever seen this. We have one of these things at home, actually. I don't even know what it's called. It's like this a huge metal dome. And you put this metal dome on a fire. And then you slab a piece of dough on the dome, and it turns into pita within about, I don't know, half a minute. Yeah. Do you know those things? Yeah. Those big domes? Yeah. So obviously, to use that dome on Shabbat is Isur D'Oraita. It's a D'Oraita prohibition from the Torah prohibition because you're baking the dough, right?
And so you're also maybe lighting the fire.
No, but okay, yeah, that's true. But the Gemara's just talking about a guy, a non-religious Jew, who takes this dough and he throws it onto the dome, and a religious person sees him do it. He runs over to the dome and pulls off the dough immediately. Why does he do that? Because as long as the dough hasn't cooked, as long as it hasn't baked, he hasn't done the Isur yet. You follow? So the rabbis say it is forbidden midrabbana. You can't, obviously it's all mul, so you'd never be allowed to do. The rabbis wouldn't not allow you to take it off. And the Gemara discusses over here, can I transgress a rabbinic prohibition in order to prevent him from doing a biblical prohibition? You follow? Well, meaning he'd be an Isur of skila. You could even argue, and the Gemara it's almost like pikuach nefesh, because the punishment for what he's doing is death. So if I avoid his death penalty, I'm saving his life. You follow?
A different question first, right? Because this is completely different than the first scenario. In the first scenario, you have a girl who's living in an observant home. She's being forcibly removed and seduced to abandon her religion.
Right.
Her clearly danger. You'll have a person who, for whatever reasons, he's off the derech. He's to throw more dough back on and make another pita. It's not going to do anything for him, So for me to violate Shabbat, on his account, like, yes, you're helping him do one less avera. But you turn around and leave, he'll make another one. The solution to save this guy's nefesh, so to speak, is not just to take off the pizza, but you have to sit down and talk with him, and you have to be makari with him.
Right.
And you're not going to do that by jumping into action and offending him, because when you do that, you're going to turn him off, and he's not going to want to listen to what you have to say. He's going to say, why are you ruining my food?
So you're saying, get on the wagon, but don't touch the dough.
You should go talk to him, and you don't have to give him a warning, because he probably already knows. And if you give him a warning, all you're doing is making him chayiv death penalty,
right?
Which doesn't help him either, right?
Yeah,
so you sit down with him and you start to talk with him, and you see what you can do to be makari with him, but jump into action isn't going to save his neshama.
But it's a mitzvah to rebuke as well, right?
Correct. Last week's parasha.
Yeah. It's not to rebuke a person who's off the derech.
Right.
If he doesn't accept,
you can rebuke with words. You don't have to break Shabbat.
But he could change after this fact.
Yeah, don't underestimate.
Like you talk to him. They don't play God's lawyer.
But you have to take to prevent the avera.
No,
it's
going to break Shabbat. His avera, but doing your own avera.
No, it's going to break Shabbat. It's much worse than you doing something.
But you're breaking Shabbat too.
No. You're not breaking Shabbat. Your Isur is D'Rabbanan. Yeah, D'Rabbanan. But the question is, can my D'Rabbanan save his D'Oraita? That's the question.
No, but if this was true, wouldn't it make
that's so hot. It's not, yes. Very harsh.
Wouldn't it make sense to, on Friday night be in Tel Aviv, and every time someone throws all the restaurants that are open, every time someone throws a piece of dough on that thing, to go in there and pull it off? I mean,
Yeah, that would be quite a crazy thing to do.
Yeah.
All you would do is start getting all these leftists worked up, and they'd be screaming about how they're religious.
Yeah, that's the Gemara. That's a separate issue. The Gemara over here really is not giving practical advice. It's not saying this is what it's really discussing values. Do you know what I mean? It's not giving a practical. And I think the more you study Gemara, that's clear. And you wouldn't say, based on this Gemara, let's go to Tel Aviv. We would take from this Gemara, discuss a question of, like, to what extent do I have a responsibility? You follow? That's more the question. To what extent do I have a responsibility towards him? The words of the Gemara is chate, sin, a little sin, kadeshi is kechavercha. Like I do a little thing wrong in order to prevent him from doing something larger wrong. Is that clear? Okay. So I want to read there. I mean, there's the Balei Tosafot and the Rashba all deal with this. Now I just want to tell you what the Rashba actually says, because it's different to what you were saying before. Let me see if I can find it. Here. And you see in the third paragraph at the Tosfot, he writes over here. Ken Omer Riva, the underlined bit. Hacha hamase shel isur kvar naasa. Umimele yigmor lo yaseh al pi isur kal biyadayim. Meaning, he says that in our case, the isur has already been done. I can't prevent, meaning this Jew has already taken her away, meaning the act has already been done. So therefore, when I intervene, I can't be sure that I'm going to be successful. You follow? Because he's already taken her. So in that case, I mean, it's like you can discuss this argument in many ways. In that case, my intervention is not guaranteed to succeed.
He says because there's
but in the dough case, it is guaranteed to succeed, because in the dough case, nothing. It's still a piece of dough. So my intervention, which will be an isur de rabbanan, which will guarantee success, versus an isur de oraita that may work or may not work, because their transgression has already been committed. They've already taken her away. You follow?
Doesn't sound like a very Jewish idea of where there's a chance that I might not succeed, so I might as well give up and not try.
No, you're right. You're right. That's not the point. That's not the point he's saying. I think they're just like playing with your mind a bit here to say that you can view the cases really in the opposite way.
He's not making a he's not poskening like that. He's just trying.
Well, what he's doing. It's not a closing argument to say do this or that. Well, I wouldn't say. He's just presenting arguments with which he wants to reach his conclusion. Okay. You follow? Yeah, it's more. Yeah, I would say he's more presenting arguments with which.
It up.
Right. Exactly. He's setting it up, and the truth is the conclusion. Well, there's an argument between the Balei Tosafot and the Rashba. I'm just thinking we're not going to go through the whole of the Tosafot here. The Gemara, he quotes another piece of Gemara that talks about somebody who is half Eved and half a free person, right? We force the person the person who owns this half Eved to free him. Now, you're not allowed to free an Eved because the Torah said, but Lo'olam ba'hem ta'avodu, that you're supposed to, if you have an Eved, you're supposed to keep him as an Eved. But if he's half Eved, the Gemara in Kiddushin tells us, and Gittin, if he's half Eved and half Ben Chorin, he can't marry anyone. So he can't marry a Shivcha, because he's half a Ben Chorin, and he can't marry a Jewish woman because he's half an Eved. So he can never marry. So the mitzvah of Pru Ravu, so again, in order to allow him to do his mitzvah Pururavu, I, his owner, transgress a small mitzvah of releasing my slave before time. You follow? So there's another example
How
of...
do you become a half Eved in the first place? You're either Eved or
that's often to do with like a shuta. There was some, there's some partnership between different people. Yeah, the scenario of how to create one is a good question. But we won't go into that now. But once he does exist, once you do have this half Evet and half Shivcha, half Ben Chorin, again you have that same dilemma of, if I free him, I will transgress the mitzvah of, owning slave, of not freeing him. On the other hand, by freeing him, I'm allowing him to do Peru Ravu. And over there, on that issue, the Gemara says he is allowed to do that. The Gemara in Gittin, because that's a mitzvah rabbah. Peru Ravu is a big mitzvah, and therefore you're allowed to do it. From that, I'm afraid to say that the Rashba, and also based on the argument that we mentioned earlier about the, guaranteed success, not guaranteed success, Isur D'Oraita, Isur D'Rabbanan, the Rashba, who was asked a question, and therefore one must assume that's what they did. The Rashba said he's not allowed to.
Wow.
He's not allowed to follow. He's not allowed to get on the wagon. And the example that when the half Evet, half Shivcha was allowed because that's a mitzvah rabbah, that is a great mitzvah of bringing a child into the world, Peru Ravu, but it would not apply in our case over here.
In the first
Yes.
case, right, here's the timeline. Man comes in, ducks the daughter,
Oh no.
runs off.
Right.
Then I run to the rabbi, I ask the question, and he has to give me a psak, and then I can act.
Correct.
Now, if I already knew the psak, and I already knew, for example, let's say that he made the psak that I could chase after him, and I knew this halacha. The second they're out the door, I'm on my wagon. I'm right behind him.
Right.
And the chance of success is pretty high.
Sure.
Right. So his answer works only because he took the time to go.
Those critical minutes. Yes, very good. Yeah, I mean when the Rashba was asked a question at that moment, that might have been the answer.
Right, but had he known that he could, without having to go ask, he could have gone.
Right, that's
prevented it.
You're right.
So
Yeah, very very good point.
It sounds like you can, if you go immediately.
Right. Yeah, very good. You're right. That's a very interesting reading of why it was that the Rashba came out so strictly. On the other side are the Balei HaTosfot. The Balei HaTosfot actually on the Gemara in Shabbat that we looked at a few minutes ago. And it's at the bottom of the Bet Yosef in the underlined piece. V'hashta im letirutza de mitzvah rabba hadavar barur she'enecha mitzvah rabba milahatzila shelo yafchiduha ad shetishtamed. So he says, in our case over here, if we're going to allow, as the Gemara in Gittin tells us, that you're allowed to release the slave because that's a mitzvah rabba, Tosfot extrapolate. And they say, if Peru Ravu is a mitzvah rabbah, preventing somebody from becoming a heretic is certainly a mitzvah rabbah. So the Gemara didn't say it, but this is the Tosfot adding onto the Gemara. Is that clear to everyone? Yeah. Just going to have a puff interval. Where are my puffs? I'm so sorry. Papa. Oi. Yes. Just a little bit.
That's what you call an inhaler in Britain, a puffer?
No, they probably call them inhalers as well. Tell you what they are. They're absolutely amazing. Just amazing. See, stuff is really heating up. It's like the discussion's heating up, you know what I mean? On all levels. Oh, that's amazing.
What's the difference between these two?
I know. This one's like when you're not feeling good.
Oh, okay.
And this one take every day. Okay. Okay, so the Balei Tosfot say like this. If you want to argue that it's a mitzvah rabbah, this is certainly a mitzvah rabbah. And if you want to talk about, the Gemara spoke about freeing the slave as opposed to taking the pita off the
Dome.
And he said, the pita on the dome, he is more strict because if the guy did it on purpose, then he has to face the consequences of his actions. Meaning, it's not my job to break a mitzvah. I shouldn't have to, like if somebody intentionally went to do an aveira, I can't do an aveira to save him from his aveira. You follow? So in the case of the pita, if the guy did it intentionally, then you wouldn't be allowed to do it. But this girl wasn't. She was abducted.
She ran away intentionally.
So that's something that here you're right. But our case, he's only discussing the case that was asked.
With the pita, it's not like if you would transgress Shabbat over someone get killed, it's not the way that someone should be maybe killed. And with the pita, he should get skila by the baiting.
Right, correct.
So if he's killed by some crazy guy attacking someone, and you kill the attacker, then you make the world right. And
right.
By making the skila, then the world.
That's also you're right. That's your very excellent point.
The killing.
Excellent. That's exactly the rationale. Like it's his pshia. He has to take responsibility for his actions. Mm-hmm. It's his pshia. But in the case, if you remember, when the Bet Yosef described the story, it does say that she was abducted. Nachon, that it wasn't she went by a will. So those two reasons. First of all, she wasn't going willingly; she was forced. And second of all, if we're going to say that Peru Ravu is a great mitzvah, so then avoiding apikorsut is certainly a big mitzvah. For those two reasons, the Balei Tosfot say you would, as really was the consensus here, we are Tosfot people here, you would be allowed to go onto the wagon. Is everything clear until now?
Yes.
Okay, that is the diyun in the Rishonim. Now, to conclude, I want to show you halacha l'maaseh because it's very, very interesting what Rav Yosef Karo does in his Shulchan Aruch. Does he choose to follow the position of the Rashba, or does he follow the position of the Balei Tosfot? He presents both of them, nachon? Both are arguments, because although we were reading Rashba and we're reading Tosfot, we were reading them as they appear in the Bet Yosef.
Aside from the whole Rav Yosef Karo, Sfardi, and Ashkenazim may have different opinions, if one sees the halacha as one way in the Shulchan Aruch, paskin by Rav Yosef Karo, but happens to, for whatever reason, they believe more strongly in the Tosfot argument, is it violating halacha to hold by a different rabbinic authority?
Oh, that is such a that's an excellent question. It's very, like, how do you reach a Pesach Halacha? That's really your question.
Yeah.
How do we reach a Pesach Halacha? In general, you follow your family tradition. If you don't have family tradition, then you normally go far back enough to find a family tradition. And the most important thing is to be consistent. What you can't do is, I'll follow the Tosfot over here because that fits into my lifestyle, and I'll follow, I don't know, somebody else. Follow different people. Yeah, you have to be part of a tradition. There are some traditions that take the Rambam very seriously. So then, if you follow that tradition, then you take the Rambam very seriously. Others follow the Gra very seriously. So if you follow the Gra, you have to follow the Gra. Whoever it is that you take seriously, you have to take them seriously. That's really an important rule in terms of halacha. But I want to go now to the Shulchan Aruch. And the Shulchan Aruch, interestingly, I think, mentions twice speaks twice about the topic of pikuach nefesh. In Siman Shin Kafchet, which is the first source over here after Rav Yisraeli that we're not going to read now. The Shulchan Aruch Shin Kafchet is the Siman in Shulchan Aruch of Hilchot Pikuach Nefesh on Shabbat. So that's where he writes all of the laws connected to Pikuach Nefesh. And we're going to come back to it in our future Pikuach Nefesh discussions. There, he writes, look at this. Mi sherotzim le'onso she'avor aveira gedola. Somebody who is being enticed in order that they do some great sin. You follow that? Somebody who is being enticed to do a great sin, like this girl. Ein mechanelim alav Shabbat kedei lehatzilo. You're not allowed to break Shabbat in order to prevent them from being enticed. And you see, he quotes the Bet Yosef b'shem Rashba. That is the position of the Rashba that we saw earlier, who in the Rashba case said you're not allowed to get on the wagon. It could be, and it goes back to really something you were saying much earlier about definitions. It's very, very difficult to know how to define enticement. Do you know what I mean? How serious, and that's really the question that you were trying to push for before. And maybe because, there's black and white, I can ask a doctor's an opinion. Someone, is their life in danger? Is their life not in danger? But I don't know, somebody, if chas v'sholom, like a sister jumps into a car with a couple of friends and drives out on a Friday night. So I don't know what they're going to do. That I'm sure it's not the greatest, but is her spiritual life forever in danger? It's hard to know that, and maybe because of that, it's hard to say whether you'd be allowed to jump in a car afterwards and bring her back.
Someone's spiritual future than the physical one.
Right, exactly. It's really very much connected to the questions you were asking right at the beginning. And I suppose when in halakha you have to have clear rules, and because it's so difficult to come to clear rules here, so that's why the Bet Yosef in this situation follows a Rashba, which is a shame. I wouldn't say a shame, which is it's hard to hear that. Only hard for us to hear that because in our earlier discussion in the room, you're basically there already. All of us were about to get into the wagon. And here the Shulchan Aruch paskins like the Rashba who's saying you can't. However, that's not the end of the story. If you go to
no wagon.
No, go to Shin Vav.
Give out a car.
Very good. Look what he writes in Shin Vav, which is earlier, obviously, in the Shulchan Aruch. Now here he follows a Tosfot. Mi sheshalchu lo, somebody who was sent a message. This is in the Shulchan Aruch. It's amazing. Sheotziu bito mi beito b'Shabbat lohotzia miklal Yisrael. You follow? He hears that his daughter has been kidnapped on Shabbat, which is mamash our case. Mitzvah lasum derech pa'amav or lishtadel labahatzalata. You have to jump in a car or whatever it is to get her back. V'yotzei afilu chutz l'shlosh parsaot de'i lo bai kaifino le. And if he's not willing to go, you push him to go. In other words, in a situation which I suppose is different about somebody who's being enticed. Yeah, somebody who's being enticed, and that could be like the chevra are going out, and they're like chatting, and then I don't know, like a family member who's less observant, and they jump into the car on Friday night. You can't jump into your car afterwards and follow her and start singing Shabbos Miras. That's not the same. But in the case where somebody was kidnapped with the express purpose, do you see that of that? L'hotzia michlal Yisrael, to have her leave the Jewish people, then it's a much clearer situation. So I wonder if we could say that of the two positions, we have the Rashba and we have the Baalei Tosafot. I wonder if we could say that in general, we have to be very cautious in being Mechalel Shabbat. We take Shabbat very seriously, and if we were to take the like this jumping in cars. If we take it to the extreme, I mean, everybody will be driving, doing kiruv all around the world all the time because we're saving souls, and that would just destroy Shabbat. You follow? So if you take that position, it's not going to work. However, in that unique and rare and tragic situation, lo aleinu, that no one should ever experience, where a daughter is kidnapped and taken in with the express plan that she should leave the Jewish people, in that situation, you're on it.
Right there with the shotgun.
Beseda? Okay, that is the conclusion. Any thoughts, comments, he'arot?
That was awesome.
Wait, so just to make clear from my head. So if it's known that she was taken like as kidnapped, not as like that, but if there's like some sort of doubt, still, like the preacher was kidnapped, but they're not 100% sure it was kidnapped.
Yeah, so I'm not sure. You're right. It's very hard to know what sim la'onso she'avor avera gedola. They're being enticed to do a great sin, versus that they were kidnapped in order they should leave the Jewish people. I suppose the big thing is to be part of the Jewish people.
So
that's a lovely idea. I like this idea very, very much. That as long as I identify as part of the Jewish people, so then I'm part of the chevra. Like whether you do a bit more, a bit less, that's less dangerous. You'll always come home eventually. Like if I place my lot with the Jewish people, I'm part. This is my nation. So then I'm less worried about like if this happens or that happens. But when there's a danger that you may leave the Jewish people, then you would, if that's what's up for grabs, then you would be able to. That seems to be the. If you're not sure, I don't know what to do then.
Also, isn't there a difference between warning someone against sinning versus forcing their hand? I mean, you can warn someone, it's fine, but if chasing after them in the car is kind of like, that's beyond just warning. It's going a little bit above and beyond that. So
you're kind of living their life for them at that point.
Yeah, I kind of agree with the Shulchan Aruch. Maybe I'm Sephardic, so I'm biased. I don't know, but
wait, which one? He's at both of them.
The Rashba, where he says that you can't really, shouldn't really get in the way. I think just like as far as emotionally, like I'd want to but
yeah.
More practically, warning them is, is as much as you can do. You can't force somebody to.
I know we're like in a different sort of world now. I mean, like the Sinai, the Shulchan Aruch 400 years ago, the Rashba earlier than that. They're describing a world that's so entirely different to the world in which we live today.
Wait, also to add to that, like I think nowadays if this happened, then like you wouldn't go to you call the police. Like you wouldn't do anything yourself. Probably would call the police and let them handle it, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Unless you were a gun carrying citizen.
No, but still, so for example, like on Shabbat, like God forbid, Chas Shalom, like Shabbat in the morning, I woke up and my daughter wasn't in her bed, wasn't anywhere in the house. Like I wouldn't go in my car and start searching and call the police.
Yeah,
you would also join that search though. You wouldn't go direct.
Yeah, but ask the police can. I wouldn't just go out in the car and start looking for her.
Yeah, you'd have different resources nowadays. Just call her.
If you were in Borough Park, you just scream Chapsum, and then 100 Hasidim would run after them.
Oh, that's so holy. That's so holy.
Just someone gets mugged or something, or robbed, scream Chapsum, and everybody on the street will go and run after them.
And even if it's not the right guy.
I want to conclude with a blessing for all of us. A blessing that is very important to remember. I know for us who have the great honor and pleasure of being part of this phenomenal place, certain things are clear, but what's beautiful from our discussion is the importance of identifying as part of the Jewish people, the effort, the thought that you'd be allowed to be Mechalel Shabbos because of the possibility of somebody wanting to let go of their membership of the Jewish people makes us so grateful and so honored that we have chosen to be part of this to identify as part of the Jewish people is such a great and phenomenal zechut for each of us, and we should wear it proudly. Yishar koach to all of you.
Wow, that was super.